It's time. Welcome to Primetime Party Time, a live online digital radio show and podcast about pop culture media and whatever we want. I am Tracy, and we have our other host,
Daniel. Thanks for that intro, Tracy. That was great.
Oh, thanks. And yeah, we're here to start with our first episode. We'll tell you exactly who we are in this space, what the show is going to be about, though it might evolve and grow with us, and some of the things we've been really into in 2020 in terms of music and TV and media, and also just like what we're trying to achieve coming up into the next year. So, yeah, welcome to Primetime Party Time.
Sweet. So who are we? Why are we hosting a show?
Why are we talking online and who cares?
Tracy, how'd you get into this? Yeah, who cares? And Tracy, how'd you get into this?
How do we get into this? So
Let's
funny story is that in terms of Daniel and I working together, we've known each other since high school, and we've both been in creative media spaces. Mine has been more on the journalism side, though we both did college radio. So yeah, I worked at KUCI as a DJ, and I did a music show that was called Indecision. LOL, I love a pun. And it was at 4 a.m. So, listenership was 4 a.m. But it was a really good time. I really liked the whole experience of being a DJ, broadcasting. And ever since I stopped, which I did after a couple semesters in college and mostly switched to doing like write-ups for the radio station and music reviews and hopping on other people's shows. And I always kind of like wish I kept it going and wanted to stay in touch with radio. So I work in marketing now, and I've kind of dabbled with visiting radio stations and participating in local programming groups and stuff, but wanted to get something going. And Daniel and I were in the same kind of creative headspace of let's get something together. And we decided to do this after chatting one day and being like, we've had this conversation, and we chatted about this like just moments ago of like, actually, we've talked about doing a project together for like many years.
Long time.
But this January, we also had a conversation about it, and we made like progress along the year towards it. So yeah, it's a good cheers to 2021 of making this happen and getting it started, regardless of what we sound like today. But now on to insert chuckle. And now to Daniel. How did you get into radio?
College radio is a magical thing. I was a transfer student at San Francisco State, and I was hanging out in the fine arts department or the fine arts building, going into the cinema department, and I was always looking at the adjacent building. I have no idea what it was. It was the liberal arts building or something, but it's where the broadcast and electronic communications program was. And I just remember every day just either looking out the window towards the building or roaming the halls and just like feeling more that the vibe and the ideas going on in that building were more suited to my time there, or more what I wanted to do. So I fought vigorously to make my way over, and the radio department was there. It was interesting. It was led by this really awesome dude named Jeff Jacoby, who's like really into sound art and radio freedom and stuff like that. And so I jumped in to that, and was a little bit into audio at the time. And 2014 was like the year prior, and it was a really good year for podcasts. And just never really looked back. Graduated, wanted to get back here, and was talking to you. And here we are. Also, wanted to say hi to our first chat user, BMac.
BMac! Howdy.
But yeah, that's That's where I come from, is as well. College
Awesome.
radio, KSFS.
So now that you guys know a little bit more about us, we'll tell you a little bit more about the show.
Oh
So
yeah, what are we
prime
doing?
time, party time. What is it? The answer is it's kind of what we make it and what you make it. This is an interactive show, or at least it will be when we get some more people up in the mix. But so far we have BMAC
Woohoo!
to at least be in there. Woo! We will keep shouting you out until there's more people. And then it's also like prime time. We think about it in the kind of old NBC way of must see TV, and us is like must listen audio. One of the areas I want to see it grow into is bringing on emerging and budding artists, both local and outside of it, to play musical sets, do stand up comedy bits and sketches and whatever we want, honestly. Poetry, everything is all welcome. That's I kind of want to have like a platform for artists to share content. I think that would be really fun. And I know that's something Daniel is into very much as
Oh yeah.
well. And what does prime time mean to you?
I mean, you nailed it, right? Like, primetime is that must see, must listen, like crazy, like entertainment, and it's about appointment, it's about community, and that's what we're doing here. And anything beyond that, I personally haven't thought much further ahead. So very excited for what this show grows into. Yeah, always interested to hear what primetime means to anybody else through our chat on ptptshow.com. Or hit us up right now. The only way to do that is if you know us personally or at info@ptptshow.com. But we do want to know, what does prime time mean to you? What does prime time mean to everybody? And yeah.
Yeah, it should be noted to listen live, you must go to ptptshow.com.
Yeah, that is where we live
and
stream.
yeah, that's where we live stream, and we'll get you back there in the credits. But you bring up a good point that one of the things we talked about together that was important to us as well was the collective audience experience. So we really want to have everyone listen live, but also listen later.
Yeah,
That's
we'll
fine
be on
too.
Apple and
We know you're
Spotify.
busy,
We just have to do this
but
first.
that's I was like, this is a very natural way to talk about our streaming availabilities. But yeah, that's something we wanted to go into too. And we also want to see what prime time means to everyone. And we're trying to somewhat bring it back into the mix. I think we're both kind of into nostalgic and vintage stuff.
Well, that is an interesting
Yeah.
point, because primetime historically has been really easy to recognize, right? Like, it was always that 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. hour on your television that the networks
Yeah.
would basically put their best content on, which has changed a little bit. And primetime in 2020 might mean something different. So I like that idea of like bringing that nostalgia back to the
Yeah.
appointment.
Because in a way, because everyone is like a subscriber or a listener on a digital platform more so than anything else, you kind of are, all of the powers that be can see who is watching and listening to what. So the prime time is a lot kind of more weighing on the audience now more than ever, because before it was more like, market research groups and cable subscribers. And since we're seeing all of that change, I think that's also what we kind of want to do here, is bring up kind of unearthing some stuff that you might want to put into your personal prime time. And that's something we hope we can do. And
Put that
also
on the
just
copy.
have a good time. Yeah. And yeah, so that's
So then,
something we want to get into.
yeah, and that brings us, so in saying that and where we are now, what have you been seeing in 20, like, let's just talk about what we know right now, right?
Yeah.
So what have you been ingesting? Like, what's your inspiration in 2020?
So our 2020 digest. A lot of music and a lot of television is where I'm at. Books and movies are things I should definitely. I usually watch a lot of movies, but I feel like this year I didn't watch. Not a surprise. Did not watch as many new movies this year, but I don't think anyone did unless they are privy to other sources. So yeah, a lot of music and TV, because those are also my like two prongs of my cross.
Yeah.
But the current but the top listens I have for 2020, and I kind of subjected it into different categories. But for current artists, I really shout out Leanne LaHavas, Namesake album. It's really good. She's a really talented
But what
vocalist,
what was the
guitarist.
I missed it. I'm sorry.
Leanne LaHavas.
Leon the
Yeah,
Habas.
she's a British artist. A few of the people I like are actually. And Jessie Ware. I think I used to always say this Ware because I think of things. Lots of things I discovered in Japan, discovered in college. I was also taking Japanese at the same time, so I like read it that way. But I think her last name is Ware and not Ware. But if anyone knows, correct me. But she has an album called "What's Your Pleasure?" Love that. It's very like disco-y, but at the same time modern. But it's very fun and dancey. Like Jordan Rakei. The new Strokes album, so good. But I also just rep them since middle school. I'm like, yes.
Nice.
Um,
We'd give you
and
samples
then,
of all of this if we could, by the way, but we do not
yeah,
have
if
the right
not for
FCC license for
copyright
that.
law, I would just play clips. And if we had the rights to music, we would play them. And Fleet Fox's new album, Shore,
Fleet
also
Foxes,
great.
nice.
And Phoebe Bridgers' album, Punisher, love it.
Wow.
And two new artists that I really like. One is called The Dip. Very much
Oh, the
recommended
dip.
if you
Yeah, I
like.
know the dip.
Yes. Oh, I love that we did not plan this, but we also both like this person.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very similar. If you like, I think like Alabama Shakes, Wolfpack, like that kind of like.
Yeah, I
I
found them
guess
in a Wolfpack
it's like a
playlist.
retro rock kind of. Not, I wouldn't say it's bluegrassy, but it does kind of have that like kind of southern feel to it, but it's really good. And then I found a band called Boy Pablo that I like, and it's very
Boy
like
Pablo.
carefree indie is what I would call it, because it's a lot of the lyrics are kind of about like chilling and letting loose, but also like in a very kind of like takes you back kind of way. And two older artists that I kind of like dusted off that I really liked was I listened to a lot of kind of like later Diana Ross songs, really love. And then Q Sakamoto, who is like most famous for the song Sukiyaki. And it was like a very popular like 60s song, but he also has like a bunch of songs that are kind of in that like Roy Orbison Pretty Woman style. Like they're just kind of like 60s kind of swingy pop songs, but in Japanese, and then some covers of like American songs too. But those are fun. So those were like my Spotify, if I could define my own Wrapped, which I cannot, which is mostly my running playlist, which is always ruins the algorithm, but it's all good. But yeah, that's where I'm at with music. If you want to weigh in with some here too, I will give you some space before I move on to TV.
Me, yeah. And if you
Yeah.
have anything in the chat too, I'll probably go back and listen back to this episode and add everything that you just said, because my listening in 2020 is kind of taking a weird turn. Right,
Ooh,
like right at the beginning of the year. Not that we were driving much anyways at the beginning of the year, but my car's
kind of
aux
were.
kind of jack kind of failed on me. And so I was just at a local record store down in Encinitas called Lou's, and they were selling these big boxes of CDs, like 60
Yes.
for $5, and I was like, all right, I need something. Like, let's go. And so now I'm
I
I'm
love it.
super well versed in the indie music scene of like 2007. And by the
Oh,
time I was
yeah.
finished with all of that,
Love that.
I was basically I realized that I was like 4 months behind on my Audible credits from my Audible subscription. So
Ah.
I've been playing a bit of catch up with that. And one of the books that
Oh,
I went for was Three Ring Circus, which is about like the late 90s, early 2000s Lakers years with like Shaq, Kobe, and Phil Jackson. And I took it on because Phil Jackson is one of the protagonists in The Last Dance, which came out on Netflix halfway through the year. And I wanted more of him. And that, I guess, can be our segue into what we're watching.
yes. I was thinking that when you were saying that because
Nice.
My boyfriend Sean watched The Last Dance, I think 2 to 3 times, so I
Yeah,
feel
it's
pretty
worth it.
comfortable with the content. But like when you were saying that, I was like, oh, that book is a good lead-in to that show. So that's I also really like things where if I'm not ready for something to end, it's like, oh, I could go to that.
Yeah,
And
there's
it's not like
more.
completely the same, but it's kind of like that when the anime ends and there's still the manga and you're like, oh, I could just keep it going a little bit before before I have to set it free. But yeah, shows that I really liked, and this is probably where we have a bit more crossover. Though I have
Oh,
to stop
probably.
and say that I also have like a nice like appreciation for CDs. It's something that I always do when I back in the day when we traveled. If I went somewhere, I always wanted to find either a record store or something and get a CD from an artist that's either like really known there or whatever is like kind of like a special edition. Like they
Oh,
recorded this
nice.
album here. Like I think when I was in college, I got something like where it was like the Weezer album they recorded in Japan, and I was like,
That's
yes.
awesome.
So there's like things like that. So I love CDs though. Even though like I mostly listen to things on Spotify, there is just something about like collecting it and having it and being like my favorite things I want to have on CD and everything else I can have in my streaming library. So
Yeah, fully agree.
yes, CDs. But back to television. Top shows of 2020, and some of these came out. A lot of these came out this year. I think there's a couple that maybe not so much, but I really liked Never Have I Ever. Loved that.
Didn't
Dairy
watch it.
Girls.
Oh, Dairy Girls. I know.
Ah,
I didn't watch Dairy Girls, but I watched them on the Bake Off special.
th- see, that's how I got into it. I
Oh,
watched
really?
the Bake Off special, and then I was like, these people are pretty enjoyable to watch. I feel like I should watch their show. And to be fair, Netflix had been like pushing it on me in my
Oh,
queue. Like, you will want this show. And I kept being like, mm. And then I watched it and was immediately hooked. I was, like,
was
I
it
should have
anything
listened
like
to
Never
the
Have I
Netflix.
Ever?
They knew. Never Have I Ever I knew was coming out because I just follow Mindy Kaling, so I really like
Oh, okay.
anything she makes. So that one's like a show about a girl in high school, and she's kind of going through like loss of a parent, but also just like regular high school stuff. And it's just like very heartwarming and cute and funny,
Oh, I
all in
remember reading about
a
this.
lot of
Yes.
different storylines that happen at the same time, and I really like that. And Dairy Girls is like, I think just if you're someone who loves dark comedies and it's sort of historical because it's happening during the Troubles in Ireland. And yeah, they use like the song Zombie a lot as like a leitmotif throughout. And it made me actually think about that song more and go, these lyrics are super good.
Mm.
Even though I think before it's always like, yeah, like I know the Cranberries, but then I was like kind of made you like think about the song and the stuff that was happening at that moment, and you're like, this was quite good.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure everyone has had that thought before, but I liked that show for showing that. But also, it's just really dark humor, and I love the writing. I think I was talking to my cousin about it, and I think she was saying it was like either like Tina Fey meets Phoebe Walling. I'm gonna
Who?
mess that name,
What?
but who is the writer who did Fleabag?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep. I know what you're talking
we'll
about.
we'll get we'll get
Butcher
back
her
to
name in a
that.
second.
I know. It's like, we'll get there. It was a good thought I had. I just could not
Phoebe
iterate it,
Waller
which is
Bridge.
extremely Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I said
You were there. You
70%
were
of
there.
that name.
Yeah.
I was on my way to thinking about it for about 17 minutes. So that's why we have our laptops to back
Yes. Very
so
trusty.
that I watched Yasahime, which is the to kind of continue talking about sequels. If you liked Inuyasha, it's
I
supposed to be
did.
like, yeah, it's like their children
Oh wait. Oh, it's
having
actually
their own
connected.
adventures. Yeah, and they in the first couple episodes kind of try to bridge the gaps a bit, but you are still kind of being like some stuff happened. Like, are we gonna get to that? And you are. They just are like untangling the threads one at a time. But
Mm.
yeah, it's like the daughters of the twin daughters of like his brother and then his daughter with
Shishimaru?
Kagome. And yeah,
Oh, that was my favorite character.
Shomaru.
No way.
Yeah,
Oh,
so it's
oh, I
his
miss
twin
Shishimaru.
daughters
I used to watch that
and
as a
then
kid on like Toonami.
Inuyasha's daughter. I know. I have a lot of also a lot of nostalgia for that show because it would be like when I stayed up late in high school and watched Adult Swim and had
Yes.
instant noodles and just was like, I have to do another day.
Mm.
and that's
Nice.
how I would like wind down before that. So yeah, that show has been really fun.
Nice.
And I have realized I have a lot of cartoons in this, but I also really liked the remake or continuation of the Animaniacs. It's super fun.
Oh,
That's
nice.
also for people who really like meta referential stuff because they do a whole kind of like download of everything that happened from the 90s up until I think 2018 when they wrote it. And there's a lot of political things, a lot of just kind of pop culture stuff. So if you like that in general, like the content you will consume on this show, you would like that show too. It's really good. But I also liked that as a kid, and I feel like this year in general was a lot of escaping backwards to times that were not the time we're living
Oh
in.
yeah.
At least that's something I did through a lot of my media consumption. So yeah, another show I watched was Fruits Basket. That is another anime, but they apparently redid it in 2019, and it was kind of also a late 90s, early 2000s show, but that one's also good if you like kind of like I don't want to say it's girly, but it's a little girly. It's just kind of like soap opera y, but
Okay.
also there's like a magical thing to it. There is like the drama of like, ooh, like which one will blah 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 pick. But there's which a lot of sitcoms kind of go through that structure, but then there's also kind of like a mystical, magical curse aspect to get through. So it's interesting. I'm a lot of people like this show, so if you
Hmm.
haven't, I recommend. And then, oh yeah, two more cartoons, and then I swear I got some live actions. I
That's a good
like
year for animation.
Agretzko. Agretzko had a new season, and that is the, if you're unfamiliar, Sanrio character that's like a red panda, and she does like office life, and then she has rage. And when she has rage about her office life, she does death metal karaoke. So
That
it's the
show.
best. I dressed up at her to hang out, in an apartment for Halloween. And so,
Nice. Yeah, that show
yeah,
got me through a very long commute a couple years ago, just with the whole office rage and letting that out. But I only watched the first
seriously.
season.
Oh, there are
I
now,
lost my
I
rage.
think, are there three or four? I think there's four. But yeah, it's really good. I think it is also very cathartic for all kind of millennial and young people joining corporate office life. And even if like you don't directly have like the same issues the person has on the show, it's like I think you still have some of those run-ins and you're just like, oh yes.
Yeah.
And it's a good time. I mean, it's also just kind of like coming of age stuff too. She does like dating stuff and like looks into getting a side hustle, just like a lot of current events. So I like that. And then the other things I liked Pen 15. They had a new season. Love that show.
Oh, I don't know anything
Find
about
it
it.
very relatable. Oh, it's like two girls that are growing up in high school and
Oh, I
kind
know
of
this one.
going through. Yeah, I feel like that show and Big Mouth are very similar in the like kids going through puberty, but also
Right,
being really
right.
hilarious about it. Like the two shows, obviously, one is more of a cartoon and somewhat not literal, but like they have more like fun caricatures about it. And then these are more just like the vignettes of like the two girls and their families. And yeah, the one girl who stars in it is also Hoppa, like myself. So I like watching it too because some of the things I'm like, oh, I feel that. So
Nice.
it's good. Yeah. So those are like the things. Oh, and I watched Yu Yu Hakusho, but that is really old. There's a lot of stuff that I rewatched because I couldn't completely remember what it was, and I needed to
Um,
be like, or I watched it when I was like 10. I was like, doesn't mean anything. I need to watch it again, and I really
right.
like that
Yeah.
show. Love their theme song, and apparently they're remaking that as a live action show, I think, on Netflix. So
Really?
that should be interesting. I haven't seen like a cartoon to real person TV show that I've liked, but I also don't think they do it that often. I just remember mostly the like Avatar TV show to movie and being like, oh, people weren't as stoked about that. So I don't know if I ever saw it though, because I usually am like, I want things to stay in cartoon form.
Yeah,
but
it's tough.
but it's hard. Like at the same time, I really liked the Aladdin movie, and that was like the Disney recent remake, and that was from cartoon to people. So
Yeah.
I think it's just, but I know everyone has a different opinion about that because anytime you switch it up, people have different things they were more attached to. And depending on what that was, you're either like, oh no, this is cool, or
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
I'm open to always giving things a chance, but I'm also like, if you're very attached to this, you might not like it.
I'm open.
Like
Yeah.
there's some things where like obviously one of my favorite things is Sailor Moon, and they made Sailor Moon Crystal, and it's not
What
bad,
is
but I
Sailor
have like
Moon
a
Crystal?
it's like so in I think 2014, 2015, they rebooted the show to be more true to the manga and like kind of redub it and just it's pretty much doing the same amount of shows and like seasons. It's not like there's like new storylines, but they kind of reimagined it. And a lot of people really like it. I haven't really been able to get past the first couple episodes because there's something about actually liking something in the like original kind of not as high def state, and then when you see something kind of get fresher and adapted for that, you're like, oh, but this isn't what I liked, and this is like my comfort food. It might
Yeah.
be like better quality, but or and the other thing is that the older one was a lot more like slapstick comedy. There were like jabs in there, and this one's a little bit more serious, but apparently that's like how the I actually have not read the comics for that, but it was like a little bit more serious, and I think they added a lot of the jokes in to adapt it to TV, but I'm like, "Oh, but I love the jokes."
Yeah.
So
Right.
it just
Right.
depends. Like if you're like me where you're like, "Oh, I'm here for kind of like that kind of humor. If that's taken out, it's going to be less for me." But someone else might have been like, I wanted it to be more like, the people who are like, I want the movie to be more like the book. Then
Right.
at the same time, those people like it. I think in general,
But you
like
have
no
the
one can be
book.
liked by everyone.
No, and like honestly, in my opinion, really the only way that I personally, as like an audience member, get a little weirded out sometimes is when they try to
Yeah.
interact with the original iteration. If you
Oh
want to come
yeah.
reboot a franchise, do your own thing with it. If it's for the
Yes.
right reasons or it has a direction it wants to go in or explore, I'm generally pretty psyched about it because we
Yeah.
have the original iteration. We can love the original iteration, and it's like the flip side of that is that like something strikes gold and the rest of its lifetime it's like stuck looking at itself in the past or whatever, which, could be good, could be a problem. Like obviously some new imaginings aren't for everyone, and some of it is out of the spirit possibly of like what really does like capture the magic of the original. But for the most part, new territory reimaginings can be. I don't know. I'm always kind of like, go for it.
I
Show us
agree.
something a
I'm always
little
like,
new.
I'd rather see something and then be like, I
Right? It's
liked the
not.
other one better than
Yeah.
have like nothing else come out at all. Which I know some people might be like, no, do not sully
Uh,
the reputation of whatever. But I think it's because once you experience both, like seeing something do a adaptation that's really good and then seeing one that's been like so so, you kind of are like, the really good option is worth the so so result.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And and because it's like, yeah, there's something for everyone. And I'm always like, ugh, when people are like, oh, but this didn't get everything in for the book, and you're just like, how long did it take you to read that book? Movie has to be like an hour and a half long.
It's a good point.
Can you fit it all in? You cannot usually. So
Nope.
it's like some stuff has to be cut.
Yep.
But I say that as someone who edits for
No, I put
a
those
a
Audible.
profession.
Yeah. No, I put those backed
I'm
up
like, cut, cut,
Audible
cut.
like uh um books on like 1.5 speed, and they're still 10 hours long. Like you can't put all that in the movie. But you can put all that in the Last Dance sequel series. Um,
One and a
but yeah, no, editing is
half.
important. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I say this as someone who like loves long form, loves to ramble, knows that things. I think because of that, I'm like, I have to do a lot of self editing. so I'm
Oh.
like, so I'm also like, I understand when other things, have to go. But I think like I'd always have like my favorite bits. I still remember there's some album review I wrote in college. I remember having a like newspaper editor who took out like my best sentence and being like, you could cut so many things, but this was gold. And
Yeah.
that's like the only time I get like, but who knows, maybe it was not. Chances are I was 21. It was probably not gold. Um, I say that then
A
being like,
21-year-olds have a, conviction to them I admire. Yeah.
it's true. Yeah, not yet been beaten down by the world. So
Yeah, yeah. It's the late
now
yeah.
you're like,
Late 20s,
might
you
have
gotta
been
check that
trash.
perspective, Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, might have been not your best. You know
Yeah.
what? Trust. But yeah, those are like the top things I watched that were new. I have things that I would say I'm late to the party on that were
Okay.
both
Like
kind of
what?
like two things I'm late to the party on that have been out and just I never watched. One was You, that show on Netflix that's
Oh,
like
yeah.
the guy.
And how'd
Yeah,
you
I
like
did.
that?
Honestly, liked it a lot more than I thought, even though it was like pretty decently creepy. But I think I like it for the same reasons I watch horror movies from time to time. And I'm not the biggest horror movie person, but if I watch it, I definitely like a psychological thriller, which this one is both because it's obviously like similar Dexter-y vibes, but without the
Oh.
redeeming moral compass.
Oh, that's fun.
So yeah, that's kind of, I mean, that's how I would wrap it up. But it's also kind of like the perception of that and the perspective of the killer. But yeah, I
Oh.
like it for the same reason I watch a lot of thrillers come Halloween time. But I was late to party on that, and then I also watched, which is like a CW show because I kind of was needing some. I was like, I need to watch something that's also kind of more like soft, and I watched Riverdale, which I actually really liked. But I also liked the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and they're supposed to be kind of
Yeah, similar in
tied.
tone and connected.
Yeah, so I watched it kind of to be like, I liked that. Will I like this? And the answer was I did. Even though
Nice.
I never watched the Archie cartoons, they are a bit old for us. But I did watch Josie and the Pussycats, which is from that. But I think it's because
Yeah.
they did a lot of crossovers with like Scooby Doo and
Yeah,
other
did you
things.
know
I
the
want to
connection to
say,
Archie back when you were watching that? Because I didn't.
mm,
I didn't. No. The only reason I ever
I
knew
did
Archie
not.
is because someone that I used to work with several years ago kept calling me
Oh.
Jughead in the warehouse and asked me if I wanted burgers. So it was fun to figure out years later.
You're like, I don't know whether to be adored or offended
Yeah,
by
yeah,
what
pretty
you're
much. Well,
calling.
it's come around, right? No.
And then to rewatches,
Hmm.
things that I like to continue to rewatch pretty much all the time, but I did this year because I had a lot more time at home to unwind and watch things. But I rewatched Ally McBeal. I really like that show. It's kind of 90s Boston law. She's like a lawyer, but kind of has like a zany kind of inner monologue that comes to life in ways. And she also, it kind of talks a lot about mental health and gender dynamics and kind of how those are coming into workplace legislation. So it's like what's weird is like some of the stuff is like this was probably happening at the time, but it's also very funny and there's a lot of kind of up and coming actors in that. So I like it for that reason. It's also just, it's a comforting kind of like Mary Tyler Moore like Girl on the Town show. I like that. I like rewatching Mad Men. Love it.
I stopped on that series the episode right before like the most famous episode of the series, the
No.
suitcase. And I just like for
Oh,
whatever reason my Netflix for years was just on the suitcase. And so I finally watched that I think this year and I was like, "Oh my god, like this is the episode everybody talks about." And yeah, it was absolutely as phenomenal as every article ever written about it was. BMAC in the chat reminds us that Robert Downey Jr. was in Ally
yes.
McBeal, which is something I have
Yes.
actually always kind of wanted to see.
Yeah, he was on the show. And then, like, I have read this online that he was supposed to kind of be like the ultimate love interest, but then, like, he was having his like personal struggles and they had to like do a completely different storyline. And
Right.
after reading that, when you watch it, you're like, I get it. Cause you're kind of like, that's odd. It's
Oh.
one of those things where like it works, but then it also is a little bit like I kind of thought that that would work out. But because like it's a pretty I think there's like 5 seasons, so there's many people that kind of like come in and out. You kind of are also like it's not that much of like a you're like okay, yeah,
Okay.
like makes sense. She's going to do this on her own. That's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that is a that is a fun fact from that show. And Lucy Liu is on that show for a bit.
Oh, really?
And Portia de Rossi is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay, I know him from
it's
that show.
they have like some fun. It's like a very quirky comedy. I like it a lot.
Nice.
And then Mad Men, obviously. Everybody loves Mad Men. I love looking at the clothes, love the dialogue. I
Yeah.
also like it from like a people who work in like ads and
Oh,
marketing and I'm
yeah.
like
You get to.
oh. And it's also like cool to see like cuz that was like the golden age of like advertising in a lot of ways.
Right.
So it's interesting to see all the stuff and like get all the kind of hints at like, oh yes, we know that song from that commercial and stuff like that. So but I also like have a soft spot for anything that's like 60s, 70s. I just like,
Mm.
oh, I love it.
Mm.
No reason why. But I watched a lot of TV Land in like middle school for that reason. And it's just like, I
Really?
don't know. I like it. I liked I Dream of Jeannie and like Bewitched and like all of
Okay.
those shows. And there's no reason. There's just kind of like I was kind of into it.
Yeah.
I liked the fashion. I liked kind of the funny mannerisms. It's a good time. So I like going back to there. And then I've already kind of talked about a lot of the other things I rewatched, but I rewatched Schitt's Creek like just constantly. I love that show.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
haven't seen it.
Is that some Oh my gosh, Daniel.
I know,
Gotta.
I know. But I
That's
did I
that
did finally see a movie with Dan Levy in it, and I get the hype. I
Ooh.
totally get the hype.
Oh, did you watch Happiest
I
Season?
did watch Happiest Season, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
I liked that movie. That
I
movie was good.
I
How
enjoyed
did
a
you
lot
feel
of it.
about it?
I enjoyed a lot of it.
I enjoyed a lot of it. I also understand what you mean because I feel like you can feel kind of like there's like cringy moments of like, oh, that's not something I'm cool with happening.
Yeah,
But
I was
I,
definitely conflicted, in the night
yeah, I
after
feel
the
like there were
movie. It
times
was
where I was like,
interesting.
I don't know if I like that for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
But
it felt like the movie was about something that I felt like I was watching a movie about something, and then at the end, the movie, like, I
it
was wrong about what it was about, and it was a really interesting feeling.
yes. Yes, it took a turn. And I
Yeah.
think like it's kind of a good feeling because you're like, ooh, was not expecting like all of this
Yeah.
to come out. And I think that's what I liked about it. It was like, oh, this is very unexpected. But I think there are also moments that I was like, ee. But to be fair, I guess that could be like stuff that happens to people's families that are not like our own. So I'm also like,
Um,
I don't have this kind of dynamic. So I'm not like feeling like channeled or connected into it. I'm watching like outside of it and being like, that's a lot. Yeah. But I also get that if like that is similar to you, you might watch that and go, oh my gosh, finally a
yeah.
holiday movie that isn't as like, warm and cuddly
Right,
in
yeah.
ways.
No, it's interesting. I want more opinions on it. If anybody's looking to extend
Yeah.
their holiday season, and
Yeah.
watch some movies late. I want to know what you think about The Happiest Season on Hulu. You hit me
Yeah.
up. You'd probably know where to find me, and if not, info@ptptshow.com, or drop it in
Yeah.
the chat sometime this week.
Tell us, because we obviously had mixed thoughts while also not wanting to say huge spoilers. But only because it came out like this year.
Yeah,
If
it
it
is of
was,
this year.
if it was like Home Alone, I would be like, yeah, if you are offended by the spoilers, this movie has been out for a long time. My sympathy is small. But it's like a couple months old, so I'm like, we'll give it some time. But yes, for those of you who have seen it, please let us know what you think in the chat so we can continue this convo on
Yeah.
how we feel about all those story arcs. Because I agree, they threw you for some loops. I feel like it's what's a similar movie that's kind of like that? I feel like
Yeah, I've been trying to think about that since I watched it. What is a similar movie that ends just that kind of throws you and like ends with
ooh,
just being a different sort of message and the movie thematically than really. I don't want to say you're led to believe. Maybe it was just my
no, I
perception of
think
what
it's
I was
just like
watching.
you're going along with it, and then you think it's gonna end more centered on the main character and like her
Which
love
most movies
interest, but in
are.
another way, yeah, and it's like it leans a little bit more towards the family, and you're like, oh, this was really a lot more about the family than
Yeah.
about them as a couple, and so that's I think the cool twist. Um, Yeah, I mean, like, there's other movies with twists, but they're not as much on the focus. Like, I can think of like horror movies where you're like, oh, didn't expect like the main character to go down with the ship, and
Right.
that's like
Right.
that's different. But
But
because
this is
most
like a
of the time,
structurally different. Like this is like a structural
yeah,
twist in my mind. I don't know. I can't really get over it. It's very odd to me.
it is. Yeah, we'll have
A
to take some
structural
time
twist.
to think about some other movies with twists. We'll come back to that in episode 2 and do some reflecting
All right, we're holding ourselves to it.
on
It's out there.
on some twists and turns. Yeah, as proclaimed by Tracy on this. But yeah, I think the other thing I've been rewatching a lot is Seinfeld, but that's not a surprise. I love Seinfeld,
Classic.
and a lot of people do. It's
Yeah.
just classic. It makes you feel good. And I also think it's another show that I watched like far too young and have to like go back and be like, oh, that one. I love that
Right.
one.
Right.
But also be like, I understand this more because it doesn't go over my head
Right. Right.
as as one does. But yeah, what do you have planned for New Year's Eve slash the New Year day? Is there
Oh,
obviously like things are very minimal right now, but
pretty
what's
minimal.
kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, like do you have some like takeout plans that you're like really craving this, want to get this out, or like beer you've acquired that you're like, I'm saving this for
Ye-
New Year's, or is it another chill night?
no, I definitely like the plans in my head are kind of brewing. Something pretty quiet, but definitely like some nice takeout. Um, And as far as like what the specifics are, I'm still kind of looking at that. I've been, spending the holidays a bit in a different like geographical location than I'll spend New
Yes.
Year's, both quietly. And so
Yeah.
now I'm finally like out of holidays mode, out of like my mini 4-day vacation mode that I needed to give myself at the end of this year.
Yes.
And so now, as of today, I've been thinking about that. If anyone's got any recommendations for some things to pick up in Los Angeles, I get
Oh
emails
yeah.
from this restaurant that used to be
Ooh.
called Dialogue here in Los Angeles.
Ooh.
That was like a
Oh.
small tasting plates place, and now it does sort of like takeout dishes under the name like Pasule or something. I can't. I don't know. I've never said it out
That
loud. I just
sounds
read it weekly.
good.
Um, but the definitely a little bit it's luxurious. It's very luxurious, very fancy, very fancy New Year's brunches. So I won't do that, but I'm looking to it for inspiration. But yeah,
Yeah.
always looking for I'm wondering what
For food
anyone else
racks.
in LA is doing New Year's.
Yeah.
What do you got? What do you got planned?
I will say that I'm also a victim of pronouncing things the way they are spelled and then being like, ah, not not how they sound. But yeah, same here. Not doing much. I think we were like thinking of either getting some Italian takeout of
Yeah,
either
that's where I'm
somewhere
leaning.
someplace nearby, like either like kind of like bougier or just otherwise to just kind of not have to cook. Though I also was before though, we have this like Bob's Burgers cookbook and we were like, maybe we should make a burger from this. So I'll kind of see like how I'm craving, but Italian takeout sounds nice just for like the cleanup perspective. And
Oh.
yeah, that's what we wanted to do that and kind of pick some good shows or movies to binge. And then I don't know if there's a way to watch the ball drop via streaming. So if anyone knows, I feel like I should. I always feel, does anyone
They should
else?
have that figured out.
You,
We've been streaming Coachella
yeah.
for a decade. You figure they have that figured out by now.
Have streamed both weekends. No, but like, yeah. How like do you feel obligated to watch the ball drop when you think about it later and you're like, it doesn't really mean this much to me, but then sometimes I'm like, ah, I didn't watch that. I feel like I didn't
I
do my one requirement of the evening. Like I have to watch that and then I have to like toast and then I have
right.
completed
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
transaction that is New Year's Eve. So I feel like I have to do that. But
Yeah,
then I
this is
also think about, I don't know,
this is gonna
but
be a nostalgic New
is that
Year's because
is that
I
not
haven't watched the ball
also a
drop.
prime time type thing?
That's a primetime type thing. For one night
Yeah.
only, primetime does extend through midnight and like to that hour and a half, whatever concert that they do in Vegas. But no, this is interesting. This will be a nostalgic New Year for me. I haven't watched the ball drop in several years. I'm usually just like someone
Yeah.
has their phone out across the room and like they've got it on a however what size screens are these phones, and
Yeah.
you can kind of like squint and see it, but mainly you're just counting down with everybody. And this year, yeah, probably gonna have to throw it on a screen and use that for my own reference. So that'll be an interesting return to form. Uh,
I want to say the streaming people will give us that because we were able to get like the election streaming. Oh,
oh no! All right, so here on Primetime Party Time, we are a completely independent show. Um, we sometimes have this like weird little thing that happens. It's nothing at all, it's nothing at all. But I think now it's actually we set. Tracy,
that.
how you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
All right, we'll get that a little smoother next time, but that was pretty smooth overall. What were you saying?
Yeah. So I was saying that back when it was watching election results, we were able to stream stuff for free.
Yeah, we should
That
be
was
able
like
to for
live
New Year as well.
television. So I want to say there's probably a way to do this that we just haven't looked into because we're out and about
We'll go to war. We'll
in
be the
season.
primetime police or something. I don't know what we'll do. We'll go to war over if like they're not streaming that kind of content, and
Like
we'll
if
make
you
sure that
don't,
it's streaming for everybody. After 2021, if it is not, we'll be on that.
I know, right?
Or
And
we'll
there's
hijack
usually
it. We'll
all
do
those,
our own ball drop in 2022. Who knows?
yeah, there's all those performances. Did you ever want to be someone who was at Times Square
Not
during New Year's
remotely.
Eve?
Did you?
I used to. I remember being like, bucket list, gotta make it to Times Square for New
No,
Year's
it's
Eve.
a classic
And
bucket
then
list.
I went to Times Square for a completely neutral weekend. The first time I went to New York, I just like went around there because we were going to a musical and immediately I was like, I would not want to be here. Like, I think it was something like where as I was younger watching it on TV, I was like, I would love to be in the thick of that. And then when I got there, I was like, this reminds me of Vegas, and I'm not a huge Vegas person. And
Um,
it also just seems like a bathroom nightmare and claustrophobia, and I don't want it. I don't want it. I
yeah.
say this, and I remember being in middle school and like surfing the web for music and finding an ad for Coachella and being like, we will go there. And then,
No way.
that came to fruition in college once one could,
Wow. Yeah.
save money for tickets and go because it was definitely not a sanctioned middle school or high
No,
school activity.
no,
I remember
really wasn't. No.
I remember trying to make that happen and I think about that now and being
Really?
like, Yeah, like, why would I be allowed to do that? Because I remember being like, "Oh, you parents are so lame, won't let me go to a party music festival,"
Yeah, I was getting
when
chaperoned
I
at
was,
the
like,
House of Blues, and
17.
Tracy's out trying to go to Coachella in 8th grade. Like, what is going on?
Exactly. No, like, that was definitely absolutely denied, and same here, like, I had to go to concerts and be like, the parents are still, like, somewhat around,
Yeah.
or it was the Del Mar Fairgrounds where
Oh,
everyone was like,
right.
you're not getting into trouble in Del Mar."
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
if anything, it's just gonna be like stuff closes down pretty early. It's like, good luck.
Yeah.
Try to make trouble
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
around
Absolutely. Yeah.
there.
The fairgrounds know how.
But
So.
but we still I mean, besides this year, we usually do go to some type of either the fairgrounds or whenever they just kind of do that summer fall concert
Yeah. No, it's a fun
series.
series. Yeah.
That's always a nice hometown activity that
Yeah.
I like. And listeners, if you have hometown events, concerts, live music that you usually do during this calendar year that you miss and are looking forward to next year, please pop it in the chat and we'll think about that. Because, yeah, as we've kind of recap on what this show wants to be, we do want to feature some artists and also feature callers. So, if you're in that chat room and you're either any of those things and you would like to chat on the air, please let us know and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah,
So,
we should have all that stuff set up. Those are some New Year's resolutions for the show. Getting
yes, New Year's resolutions for the show.
for the show, getting good call-ins, and putting in a we'll have a voicemail widget soon.
Yes.
Yeah, we got a lot of changes coming after the first episode here is published. New Year's resolutions, Tracy.
Yeah.
You got any?
I do. So, I have some things that I've done this year because, we've kind of had to restructure, reorganize our lives during this global pandemic.
Oh yeah,
And so, there are habits that I really want to keep. Like, I think in a way, you really had to become self aware and like navigate your journey through this year without getting too woo woo. But things that I want to keep doing. Like I started 2020 off as a musician playing live music. I want to get back to that when it's safe to do so, but in general, continue to keep playing, recording and writing songs. That's really big on my list. I also want to keep cooking a lot cuz I like that and like actually write down my recipes as a resolution cuz I am very much like adding things in here and there. And then every once in a while, someone will ask me, "How did you make that?" And I have to like go back and write a very detailed, long Instagram or text message. And I'm like, if I just like wrote all these down, that would be easier. And I could just copy and paste. It's like easier to digest. And also for myself, because sometimes I make things and go, crap, I don't remember the exact measurements I did for this. So that's something I want to do to kind of stay more organized. I'm going to try, even though I know when I listen back to this, I will be at fault. I'm trying to say like a bit less.
Oh, you have a
Hard to
in
hard to do
life, or
as
is this a
a
podcast resolution?
that is a both. Both on air and off air. Native Southern California and say way too much. Like I have definitely had people do impersonations of me and gone, yes, we do do
You
this.
get in
We must.
impersonations.
Oh yeah, I do that for fun sometime with friends. Be like, how do I
Okay.
talk? And then be like, oh, cringe.
I've never thought to
So
do
I
that.
was
Wow,
like,
that's
yeah.
terrifying.
Oh,
I'm gonna do that.
that's a
I'll
fun.
do that and
It's a
report
fun
back
party
someday.
trick.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Good for some also great feedback on
Yeah.
on you. I'm trying to eat less meat. Like I like a lot of
Right.
seafood, but I'm trying to eat less meat in general, which I have happened to just weirdly do this year because I've been cooking at home and I end up cooking less meat. But that's something I want to do. I want to keep running and hiking often, especially with my
Yeah.
doggy Chibi. And I also am going to try to be more organized and journal, like plan things out in a journal
Oh, that's a
physical.
noble one.
Because I do a lot of like Notes app and Google Docs, which are great.
Yes.
But I also kind of want to have, I was talking to a couple of friends about this. Like, I'm trying to do some things where it's like kind of activities with your hands, like drawing or like knitting that like other people do, and have some things where it's like kind of an escape from some screen time because I love to watch things so much that it's hard to have that self control to do that less. Or at least if I am doing that, I'm doing something a little bit like active and crafty to just kind of like get out of my own head a bit.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm aiming to do. What are your resolutions?
Yeah. So, I'm gonna give myself a little toast. Uh, that last year, my New Year's resolution was basically that I wanted to work, and find new challenges in work, and
Yeah.
did that this year. Feel pretty lucky about the
Ask
opportunity
and you
overall,
shall receive.
but
Yeah.
yeah, asking you shall receive, and I definitely took on some things that I was able to kind of be like, all right, sweet, new skills, like this is awesome, and some things that are like, all right, this is
Awesome.
going in the wrong direction. I was able to pull it off, but I don't want to again. I am burnt out. I can't really continue this. So while I'm super stoked about those experiences, I guess with this one, as vague and grandiose as this New Year's resolution is going to be, I'll leave the tag for hopefully we can kind of check ourselves on these in the future. Is basically find out like what's next. What do I want to be
Yeah.
next? What do I want to do next? What's that journey? Does it get documented on the show? Who knows? Who knows? But yeah,
It's
it's
like,
definitely
will you
like
be following progress
yeah.
on this show? Perhaps.
Yeah, got some form of who knows what happens yet, but or
Yes.
next, but yeah, I guess the New Year's resolution is to kind of figure that out. Start
Yeah.
moving in a direction, figure out what it's time to be.
Yeah. So you've kind of done the hurdles that you wanted to do, and now you're kind of looking at what comes next.
What comes next? Yeah,
I
much
feel
like
that, and
oh
yeah, I feel that in some ways. I
yeah
feel similar in general this year. I think a lot of people are given like some new challenges at work that you had to kind of just like dive in, sink or swim in a lot of that. But I think now you kind of are coming back refocused and being like, I really liked some of that stuff, and I'm glad to have had the opportunity to do that. But I'd also like to do a lot less of this stuff
yes
because
yeah
that was, yeah, I think everyone and ourselves included, like collective end of year burnout always happens. And
yeah
this year, probably a little bit extra
maybe
because of everything else going on. So I
yeah
think,
it's been a year.
as we're winding down in between the holiday stress, even though it's like not the same holidays as usual, but I still feel that like kind of like build up. And then once they're done, you're kind of like, as much as I love the holidays, I'm like, the pressure is
Yeah
gone. And now I'm just waiting for like New Year's and yeah, doing cooking on New Year's Day.
yeah
Um,
doing some
yeah.
baking, taking on baking a little bit. So see how that goes.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah
Let's keep that up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Be our
I'm
resident
not
show bake. Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I'm not as great of a baker, but a fun thing about baking is it's very much like the science of cooking. And there's like a book that I read about that when I took a course in college on it, but it's really interesting because you get into like why everything has to be in a certain order, what you can substitute, what you can't based on science, and then it helps you when you're cooking. And you kind of know like if I mess this up, no point of return. And then obviously if you get like more into it, you kind of be like so in tune that you're like, I could make this still work. But
Huh.
I'm still at the point where if I like fall out of steps, I'm like dump and restart.
Yeah.
But I'm less
I know it.
savvy. So that's
Um,
that's where I'm at.
oh, sweet. Well, with that, we just did an hour.
We just did an hour
That
of
was
episode 1, and thank you to any and all who have listened to us for our first episode
yeah.
on the books.
Thank you for joining
Yeah.
us.
Yes,
We'll be we'll be on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and all the other spots in the coming days. We just can't point you there yet, but you'll be able to find us at Primetime Party Time. or you can meet us here next Monday night at 9 p.m. ptptshow.com. The show wouldn't have been made without the following amazing people. Our artwork was done by Fen. You can find her at Fen Latte on Instagram. Our theme song playing in the background was Jay Wright. You can find him at jwrightmusic.com. Our website by our good friend Coco. And we're your hosts. That's
Tracy.
And this is Daniel. And that was Prime Time Party Time. Thanks again.
Yeah, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
How you feel, Tracy? Good show?
I think so. I think it's also the first one, and I was like, oh, we got it. We did it.
Nice.
We got it off our backs of like, gotta get the first show out. And now we can kind of like play with it. And I'm excited because I'm like, it happened.